Once upon a time, in the quiet outskirts of Nsuka, there lived a woman named Ijeoma. She didn't have much. A cracked one-bedroom flat with faded curtains, a sewing machine that squeaked with every press, and a little boy named David who was the very breath in her lungs. She was only 28 but looked older from the weight she carried. People in the neighborhood called her Mummy David, with a mix of pity and respect. Not because she was loud or showy, but because for the past 3 years, she had been fighting a battle most people would run from. David was 4 years old, and he was sick. Not the kind of sick that Panadol or hospital beds could fix. He was born normal. 10 fingers, 10 toes. A loud cry that shook the nurse's hand. But at age 1, things started to change. He began to vomit every morning. His limbs would shake for no reason. He couldn't walk steadily. And by age 2, he stopped talking. Hospitals ran tests. Private clinics bled her dry. One doctor even called it a nervous system disorder with no clear origin. They gave her pills she couldn't pronounce, syrups that tasted like metal, bills that mocked her bank account. And through it all, Ijeoma stayed. She fed him, bathed him, prayed over him every night with Psalm 91 under her pillow. She never once thought of running away. Because that boy, David, had her eyes. On this particular Monday morning, the sky was the color of smoke. The air felt thick with something unspoken. Ijeoma tied her wrapper tighter and stepped outside to hang damp clothes on the line. David sat quietly on the mat near the door, drawing something in the dust with his finger. He didn't speak. He never did. But sometimes he would draw things. Today, it looked like a long figure with sharp eyes and wavy lines coming from its head. Ijeoma bent to look closer. "Are you drawing, Mummy?" she asked gently. David didn't look up. He just drew another line. She smiled sadly, brushed his hair back, and returned to the basin. Her neighbor, Auntie Clara, leaned over the fence. "You're strong, Ijeoma," she said, unprompted. Ijeoma chuckled. "Or just too tired to cry anymore." They both laughed, but there was no joy in it. That afternoon, she walked to the small tailor shop where she took in odd jobs. She finished sewing 3 school uniforms and earned just enough to buy 1 tub of pap and a sachet of paracetamol. She walked home as the clouds began to gather. It was on that walk that her story truly began. Right outside the junction, as the first drops of rain started to fall, a woman called her name. "Ijeoma, wait." She turned. It was Nneka, a woman she hadn't seen in years. They had attended the same secondary school. Nneka was now dressed in a clean mustard blouse and dark skirt. She looked polished, confident. "Nneka?" Ijeoma blinked. "You've added weight, oh." "Ah, my sister, na small grace," Nneka smiled. Then her eyes fell on David. "Is this your son?" Ijeoma nodded. "He's not feeling fine, but he's strong." Nneka bent down, studied him quietly, then said, "You need to come with me." Ijeoma raised a brow. "Go where?" "There's a church. Not far. Prophetess Miriam. She doesn't advertise. No signboard. But what I saw there." "Ijeoma, people walk in with their dead and walk out with miracles." Ijeoma's mouth twitched. "I've tried hospitals. Prayed in 5 different churches. Mountain vigils. I've sold all my gold. Nothing." "Just come once," Nneka insisted. "One night only. You have nothing left to lose, ABI?" Those words stuck in Ijeoma's throat. She looked down at David. His eyes were distant, his lips quivering, then up at the sky, where thunder grumbled quietly behind the clouds. "Okay," she said finally. "I'll come." That Friday night, the sky broke open. Heavy rain fell like sheets of punishment. The wind howled through the cracks in Ijeoma's ceiling, but she dressed David in his only thick sweater and wrapped him in a towel. They met Nneka at the back of a market. A dusty side road led them through banana trees and broken bricks until they saw it, a small bungalow with no name. Just flickering candles in the windows and a smell of wet sand in the air. Inside, the room was dim but packed with people. No loudspeakers. No flashy robes. No money baskets. Just soft music from a keyboard, and a woman standing barefoot in front of the crowd, eyes closed. That was the first time Ijeoma saw Prophetess Miriam. She wore a plain white wrapper and held a brown wooden staff. Her voice was calm, low, and steady, not like the other mamas on TV. She didn't scream. She whispered. And yet the room shook. Halfway into the service, Prophetess Miriam opened her eyes. "There is a child here," she said. "He was born whole but taken. His body is confused, but his spirit still knows his name. Where is he?" Silence. Then David, who hadn't moved all night, suddenly stood. On his own. Without help. Gasps filled the room. Ijeoma nearly fainted. "Bring him," the prophetess said gently. David walked forward. Step by step. Straight. Without stumbling. People began to cry. Ijeoma followed him, hands shaking. Prophetess Miriam placed her hand on his head and closed her eyes. Then she said, "He is not broken. He has been marked. But tonight, the river will release him." Ijeoma didn't understand what that meant. She didn't ask. Because in that moment, her son stood like every other child. Straight. Still. Alive. And the church burst into songs of praise. Outside, the storm raged. But inside, Ijeoma wept. For the first time in years. She believed. Ijeoma didn't sleep that night. Not because of fear. But because her heart had started doing something she hadn't felt in years. Hoping. She sat on the edge of the bed, holding David's little body in her arms, rocking him gently even though he was fast asleep. His breathing was calm. His fingers were still. His skin was warm. No seizures. No fever. Just peace. She stared at him for hours, whispering over and over again, "Thank you, Jesus, thank you." Outside, the rain slowed to a drizzle. The night faded into dawn. By morning, the news had started to spread. A neighbor had seen them returning from the miracle house. Another said they saw David walking without falling. Ijeoma didn't say much. She just nodded politely, smiling faintly. But inside her, a fire had been lit. For the first time since David was diagnosed, people weren't looking at her with pity. They were looking at her with wonder. Even her landlord, who used to frown whenever David screamed at night, smiled and said, "That boy is a fighter-o." On Tuesday morning, Ijeoma did something bold. She took David to the same pediatric specialist who once told her, "You should prepare for the worst." The nurse nearly dropped her clipboard when David walked in, holding his mother's hand, humming quietly to himself. "You, wait, he's walking," she stammered. The doctor examined him for over an hour, checked his joints, his eyes, his reflexes. "His motor coordination has improved drastically," the doctor finally said. "This is unexpected." Ijeoma just smiled and said, "God is working." They left the hospital with no medications, for the first time in 2 years. That night, Neka came by with hot moi and a small envelope. "Mama Prophetess said to give you this," she said, smiling. Inside the envelope was a folded piece of paper. On it was a handwritten note. "The boy has been touched. But now the river must be thanked. Come Friday night. Bring something that carries your scent. Come alone." Ijeoma blinked. "Scent?" she asked aloud. Neka shrugged. "Usually a scarf. Or a wrapper. Something close to your body." "Why?" "It's for the river gratitude ritual," Neka said. "Don't worry, it's nothing scary. It's just Thanksgiving." Ijeoma hesitated. "I don't like strange things. Especially after what we've been through." Neka leaned closer. "Ijeoma, your son walked. Do you want this healing to reverse? That woman is not ordinary. She hears directly from the spirit world." Something about those words made Ijeoma's chest tighten. But she nodded slowly. She couldn't risk losing David again. That Friday, she wore her cleanest wrapper. The one she kept for special occasions. She tied it around her waist, sprayed her late mother's perfume on her collarbone, and wrapped a scarf around her hair. David was asleep when she left. The church was quieter than usual that night. Only a few people were present, all of them women. All of them holding items, a baby's blanket, a wedding ring, a pair of shoes. They were led into a back room. There was no pulpit here. Just a wide circle drawn on the floor with white chalk, surrounded by tiny bowls filled with water. Prophetess Miriam sat in the middle, her eyes closed, her hands resting on her lap. One by one, the women stepped into the circle, dropped their items, and spoke a word of thanks. Thank you for my womb. Thank you for my husband's job. Thank you for removing shame. When it was Igioma's turn, her hands trembled. She stepped forward, dropped her wrapper on the floor, and whispered, "Thank you for giving me back my son." Prophetess Miriam opened her eyes slowly. Then she smiled. "The river accepts your gratitude." A strange wind passed through the room. The candles flickered. Igioma felt something pass through her body, not cold, not hot. Just strange. They ended the ritual in silence. When she got home, David was sitting up in bed. "Mummy," he said. Her heart stopped. It was the first time he had spoken in almost 3 years. Tears poured down her face. She dropped to her knees and held his face in her hands. "Say it again." "Mummy," he whispered, then smiled. She laughed. Shouted. All at once. Neighbors heard the noise and came running, thinking something was wrong. But all they saw was Igioma on the floor, laughing and crying with her son in her arms. And the boy was talking. The next day, she returned to the church with a basket of fruit and a handwritten thank you card. She waited after the service to speak to Prophetess Miriam. But the usher at the door stopped her. "Mama doesn't see anyone today," he said. "She's gone to rest." Igioma nodded politely, but a part of her felt unsettled. She hadn't seen Prophetess Miriam's car leave. And something about the usher's eyes felt cold. Later that night, David began to draw again. Only this time, it wasn't random. He drew the same woman over and over again. Long eyes, sharp fingers, and a crown that looked like snakes twisting around each other. "Is that Mummy?" Igioma asked playfully. David shook his head. "She comes at night," he whispered. "From the water." Igioma froze. "What do you mean?" "She tells me stories," David continued. "She says I'm her gift now." The room went quiet. Igioma picked him up gently and laid him down, brushing the hair from his face. "Don't listen to strange voices," she whispered. "You're mine." David nodded, but didn't say anything else. He fell asleep peacefully. But Igioma did not sleep at all. Not that night. For the next 3 nights, Igioma kept waking up at exactly 2:13 a.m. Not 2:10. Not 2:15. 2:13. Each time, she would sit up with a jolt, heart racing, soaked in sweat. The first night she thought it was just anxiety. The second night, she blamed the harmattan heat. But by the third, she knew something was wrong. Because every time she woke up, David was already awake. And he wasn't doing anything loud or scary. He was just sitting, cross-legged, in the dark, staring at the wall, sometimes humming, sometimes whispering to someone who wasn't there, and always drawing. On the third morning, she picked up the piece of paper he had scribbled on. It was another sketch. Crude lines drawn with pencil, but the shape was unmistakable. A woman with long arms, standing waist-deep in a river, holding a baby. Igioma stared at it for a long time. Then folded it, tucked it under her wrapper, and went to boil water for Pap. That afternoon, her cousin Chuka came visiting. Chuka was in his final year of medical school, bold, talkative, and annoyingly logical. He had been one of the few people who stood by her when David's illness first began, and though they hadn't spoken in weeks, he had seen the video clip that was now spreading quietly on WhatsApp. "Nsuka boy walks after years of paralysis, church miracle?" "Ige," he said, setting down his backpack, "you need to tell me exactly what happened that night." Igioma smiled faintly. "God happened." "No," Chuka shook his head. "Not the kind of God I know. This woman, this so-called prophetess, what does she do exactly?" "She prayed." "With what?" "Just prayer. No oil? No candle? No water? No chant." Igioma hesitated. There was a circle, some bowls of water, and a staff. Chuka raised a brow. "That doesn't sound like anything I learned in Sunday school." "She helped my son," Igioma said firmly. "That's all I know." Chuka leaned forward. "I'm happy he's walking. I really am. But listen to me, Sometimes the price for a miracle is higher than the problem itself. That night, Ijeoma didn't sleep. She watched David until she dozed off sometime around midnight. Then, at exactly 2:13 a.m., she heard it. A knock. Not on the front door. On the window. She froze. Another knock. Like fingertips brushing glass. She slowly turned her head. No one was there. But the curtain was moving. There was no wind. She reached for her phone, dead. The bulb overhead flickered once, then went out. She reached for David. His body was ice cold. Then he whispered, eyes still closed. She's calling me, Mummy. From the river. Morning couldn't come fast enough. By 6 a.m., Ijeoma was dressed and at Nneka's door. The woman opened the door with a surprised smile. Ijeoma, you've come early. I need to speak with Prophetess Miriam, she said. Alone. Nneka's face changed. That's not how it works. Mama chooses when to. I said alone, Nneka. Ijeoma repeated, her voice harder now. This is about my son. There was silence. Then Nneka sighed and stepped aside. I'll take you tonight. But promise me one thing. What? Don't ask questions you're not ready to hear answers to. That night, they went through the same hidden path. Only this time, instead of the candlelit gathering, Ijeoma was led through a narrow hallway at the side of the main room. They reached a wooden door carved with swirling patterns that looked vaguely like waves. Nneka knocked twice. A voice from inside replied calmly. Enter. Ijeoma stepped in. The room was sparse. No furniture. Only mats on the floor. And a single bowl of water in the corner, gently steaming. Prophetess Miriam was sitting cross-legged, eyes closed, hands on her knees. She didn't open her eyes when she spoke. The river has already marked your son. Why do you resist? Ijeoma's throat went dry. I didn't come here for marks, she said. I came for healing. And healing you received. But something's not right, Ijeoma whispered. He's drawing things. Speaking to someone at night. He says she's calling him. Miriam opened her eyes. And they were glowing faintly. Not bright. Not scary. But glowing. That is how it begins. Ijeoma took a step back. What begins? The covenant. She stood slowly. Your child has been touched by something older than this world. He was chosen. The pain he suffered opened the door. You opened it. No, Ijeoma whispered. I opened nothing. You gave thanks at the river, Miriam said calmly. You left your scent in the circle. You welcomed the spirit. Tears formed in Ijeoma's eyes. You tricked me. No, Miriam said, her voice still soft. I only showed you what you were desperate enough to find. That night, Ijeoma ran. She didn't wait for prayers. She didn't wait for Nneka. She picked up David from the neighbor's house, locked her door, and cried until morning. Her hands trembled the whole time. Because in her heart, she knew. She had crossed a line. And something was watching. The next night, Ijeoma made a decision. She would not sleep. She brewed 2 cups of extra dark Lipton tea, added enough sugar to sting her throat, and sat on the floor beside David's mattress. She kept the lights on. She clutched her Bible. She recited Psalm 91 like a shield. David was already asleep, curled up like a kitten, breathing softly. Ijeoma stared at him. She had memorized every inch of his face. But now she feared it. Because something behind those little eyes was not the boy she had raised. Something was peeking through him. 1:37 a.m. The room was quiet. Ijeoma's eyes started to droop. She shook her head, stood up, paced the room, prayed aloud. 2:13 a.m. Right on schedule. David sat up. His eyes opened, but they were glazed, like sleepwalking. He turned to face the wall. Ijeoma froze. Then he whispered. Miriam. Her heart jumped. Mummy says I can't go, but she says I have to. His fingers started to draw again. This time directly on the wall with a piece of charcoal from under the bed. Curved lines. A circle. A long body. A tail? Ijeoma slowly approached. David, she said softly, who are you talking to? He turned his head to her slowly. But his voice was not his voice. It was deeper, Older. You brought him to the river. You opened the gate. Ijeoma screamed. She grabbed her Bible and began to pray in tongues she didn't even know she knew. David blinked. Collapsed. By dawn, her cousin Chuka was knocking at the door. She let him in with shaking hands. I don't know what's happening anymore, she said. He talks in his sleep. Draws things. He spoke in another voice. Chuka sat David down, flashed a light in his eyes. They look normal now, he said, frowning. But you look like you haven't slept in a week. Ijeoma laughed bitterly. Sleep? Sleep is when the voices come. Chuka glanced at the wall, now smudged with charcoal drawings. That looks like a serpent, he muttered. Ijeoma nodded. Last night he called out for Miriam. Chuka stiffened. Ij, do you know what this sounds like? She stayed quiet. Chuka leaned forward. Possession. Ijeoma slapped him. Not hard, but fast. Don't say that. Chuka held his cheek but didn't flinch. I'm serious, he said. This boy is manifesting something. Whatever they did in that church, it didn't just heal him. It activated something. Ijeoma dropped to her knees and began to cry. I just wanted him to be okay. Chuka sighed. He crouched beside her. Let me help. I know someone, not a doctor. Not a pastor either. Someone in between. In between what? In between faith and fact. That afternoon, Chuka made a call. The woman's name was Mama Nena, a former deliverance minister who now lived in the outskirts of Enugu. No signboard. No offering box. Just a quiet compound and a reputation whispered between pastors who didn't want their names mentioned. That same evening, Chuka and Ijeoma packed an overnight bag and boarded a bus with David wrapped in a blanket, eyes wide and silent. When they arrived, the sun was setting behind the mango trees. The compound was old but clean. Mama Nena was waiting outside, wearing a faded blue wrapper and holding a cane that looked older than time itself. She didn't smile when she saw them. She just nodded once and said, Bring the boy. Inside her parlor, there were no statues. No crosses. Just a mat. A clay pot. And silence. Mama Nena sat David down, cupped his face gently, and looked into his eyes. Then she said calmly, He has been offered. Ijeoma's breath caught. What does that mean? Mama Nena looked up. Her eyes were sharp as razors. In old kingdoms, when a woman wanted to save her child, she would go to the river. She would beg the spirit to take her sorrow. But the river never takes without giving. She pointed at David. The river took his sickness. In return, it marked him. Chuka stepped forward. Can it be reversed? Mama Nena closed her eyes. If you confront the altar that marked him, you must return. But this time, you don't go as a beggar. I don't understand, Ijeoma said. Go back to that church. Alone. Listen. Do not speak. And if you see the mirror, do not look into it. Later that night, Ijeoma couldn't sleep again. David was resting on the mat, breathing easy. Chuka was dozing in a chair. But she sat by the door, thinking. That word kept echoing in her head. Offered. She reached into her bag and pulled out David's latest drawing. This time it wasn't just a woman. It was the woman standing over an altar. Behind her was a crowd of people. Their faces were blank. And in her hands she held a mirror. Ijeoma stood at the gates of the church like someone staring into the mouth of a cave. She had come alone. Chuka had offered to come, but she refused. Mama Nena had warned. This is a confrontation. The river sees fear like a dog smells blood. So Ijeoma wore her strongest wrapper, tied her scarf tightly, and carried nothing but her Bible and a folded drawing of David's, the one with the mirror. It was a Tuesday evening. No official service. No crowd. But the gate was open. Inside, the church looked different. Still small. Still candlelit. But colder. Too quiet, as though the walls were waiting to breathe. The usher she had met on her second visit was nowhere in sight. Instead, a woman she didn't recognize stood near the altar, wearing a green shawl and sweeping the tiled floor with a broom made of palm fronds. Ijeoma stepped inside, her sandals making soft squeaks on the wet floor. The woman didn't look up. Mama said you'd come. Igioma froze. "Excuse me?" she asked. The woman still didn't look up. "You've been dreaming." "She knows. You've been waking at the river's hour." Igioma's mouth went dry. "Who are you?" Now the woman looked up. Her eyes were the same cold shade of seaweed. She smiled, showing teeth just a little too sharp. "You left an offering. Now you want it back." Igioma turned to leave. But the door had closed. There was no sound. No wind. Just closed. She backed up slowly, heart pounding. "I want to see Miriam," she said. "Now." The woman turned and walked toward a back corridor. "Follow," she said without turning around. Igioma hesitated, whispered Psalm 27 under her breath, and followed. The corridor smelled like earth, damp, old, and breathing. Candles flickered along the walls, and ahead, a faint hum like water dripping echoed in the silence. The woman led her into a smaller room. Circular. Stone floor. No windows. At the center stood a pedestal. On it, a mirror. It was round, framed with what looked like twisted bronze. But on closer look, they were intertwined serpents. Igioma's heart began to race. This was it. David's drawing. The mirror. She looked away instantly. "You may speak," a voice said. It was not the usher. Not the sweeping woman. It was Miriam. She stepped into the room from a hidden side door. Dressed in white. But her calmness now felt like ice. "Why have you come, Igioma?" Igioma kept her eyes low. "I want my son to be free." "He is free." "Not like this." "You begged for healing." The river answered. "Did you think miracles are free?" "He draws you in his sleep. He speaks in voices that aren't his. He said you're calling him." Miriam walked slowly toward the mirror. "I'm not calling him. The river is." Igioma clenched her fists. "He's a child. The river doesn't see age. It sees pain. And you gave it pain to drink." Silence. Then Miriam continued, gently. "The covenant is sealed, Igioma. There is no taking back a gift once the river drinks." Igioma's voice trembled. "But you said he would be healed. Not taken." Miriam placed a hand on the mirror. "He was healed. You saw him walk. You heard him speak. You rejoiced. And in your joy you gave thanks. Your scent, your wrapper, your word." Tears spilled down Igioma's cheeks. "I didn't know." "You knew enough to want a shortcut. And shortcuts always pass through the forest." Igioma took a step forward. "I want him back." Now Miriam turned. Her eyes flashed a deep, glowing green. "Then look." She pointed to the mirror. "Look and take him." Igioma froze. She remembered Mama Nena's voice clearly. "Do not look into the mirror, no matter what you're told." But now it was in front of her. The answer. The portal. Miriam smiled. "You brought him to the river. Now the river waits for you." Suddenly, the air in the room grew cold. The candles blew out, all at once. In the pitch darkness, the mirror began to glow. Softly at first, then brighter. Shapes danced across its surface, waves, hands, faces screaming silently, children standing in water. David's face. "Mummy!" Igioma gasped. She nearly stepped forward. Nearly reached out. But something sharp pricked her memory. The drawing. The voice. The snake-shaped frame. She stepped back, clutched her Bible to her chest, closed her eyes, and screamed, "I reject every covenant not from God. My child is not your offering." The glow flickered. The mirror cracked. A loud hissing sound filled the room, like steam escaping from a giant kettle. When Igioma opened her eyes, Miriam was gone. The room was empty. The door had reopened. And the mirror lay shattered on the floor. Igioma ran. She didn't stop until she was far from the compound, barefoot, tears streaming, heart pounding like a drum. She didn't know what she had done, or what would happen next. But one thing was clear. She had refused the river. That night, she returned to Mama Nena's house with bleeding feet and shaking hands. David was still asleep. But when she laid beside him, he turned quietly and whispered, "She's angry now, Mummy." That night, Ijeoma locked every window. She unplugged every socket, turned off the generator, tied David to her chest with 2 wrappers, one on the front, one on the back, like she did when he was still a baby. Then she sat on the floor of Mama Nena's prayer room. She didn't pray aloud. She didn't even open her Bible. She just whispered the same sentence over and over until her voice cracked. I don't want to lose my son. I don't want to lose my son. I don't want to lose my son. At 2:13 a.m., the shadow came. Not a knock this time. Not a voice. A shadow, tall and thin, slid beneath the door like smoke, like a cloth being dragged without hands. Ijeoma held her breath. The room grew cold. David stirred on her chest. The shadow hovered. No face. No legs. Just shape. Then it whispered. But the sound didn't come from the air. It came from inside her skull. You broke the mirror. But the water still remembers your scent. She clutched David tighter. The shadow drifted closer. Her heart beat so loudly, she thought it might shatter her ribs. A loud metallic crash from the corner of the room. The shadow flinched. Mama Nena appeared in the doorway, holding a brass bell. She shook it once. The sound was deafening. Not loud in volume, but heavy, like it hit not just the ears but the soul. The shadow hissed and vanished into the cracks of the floor. Ijeoma burst into tears. Mama Nena walked in slowly, her voice calm. You've done what many don't survive, you said no. Ijeoma looked up. Is it over? Mama Nena didn't answer immediately. She poured water into a wooden bowl, dropped 3 white seeds into it, and muttered words Ijeoma didn't recognize. The seeds floated. Then 2 sank. Mama Nena sighed. No. It's not over. But now we know what we're dealing with. The next morning, Chuka returned with a bag of fruits, a USB power bank, and a face full of worry. What happened? He asked. Ijeoma told him everything. The shadow. The voice. The bell. The seeds. The prophecy. Chuka didn't laugh. He didn't roll his eyes. He didn't question. Instead he said, There's something I need to show you. He pulled out his phone and opened a folder titled Nsukka Cases. Inside were screenshots, WhatsApp voice notes, video clips, all related to a strange string of children who were healed, then disappeared. One girl in Enugu walked again after 7 years, then vanished 3 weeks later. Another boy in ABA spoke his first word at age 9, then went missing on a church retreat. A third, a girl named Uzomako, drew pictures just like David, but was found floating in a river days after her 6th birthday. All of them, Chuka said quietly, were healed by prophetess Miriam. Ijeoma felt bile rise in her throat. Why didn't you show me this earlier? She whispered. Chuka looked down. Because I didn't believe it, until now. That evening, they confronted Mama Nena with the information. She studied the photos, listened to the audio files, nodded slowly. Then she said, It's worse than we thought. What do you mean? Ijeoma asked. This isn't just about your son. Or even Miriam. She leaned in. This is a network. Mama Nena explained. In certain parts of West Africa, there were groups, not churches, not cults, not shrines, but hybrids of all 3. They operated under the mask of new prophetic movements, but their altars were ancestral, aquatic, and coded in secrecy. They didn't want money. They didn't even want followers. They wanted access. Children who suffer the most, she said, cry loudest to the spiritual world. Spirits listen to that pain. They follow it. Miriam wasn't just a rogue prophetess. She was a collector, a vessel, an ambassador, someone who made deals on behalf of the river. And Ijeoma? Ijeoma had unknowingly signed her son over. But you broke the mirror, Mama Nena said. That's the first altar. That's the claim. Is that enough? Ijeoma asked. The older woman stood and walked to her back room. When she returned, she held out a clay jar, sealed with red wax. No. Now we go to the source. Ijeoma stared at the jar. What's in there? Not what. Who? She opened the seal. A puff of white smoke rose, carrying the faint smell of salt and burnt sugar. This is the name of the spirit that touched your son. We're going to speak it, bind it, and banish it. Chuka shifted nervously. Is that safe? Mama Nena smiled. Nothing about this is safe. But it's necessary. That night, while David slept peacefully for the first time in days, Ijeoma stood in a circle of red chalk, surrounded by candles and a thin line of palm ash. She held the jar in her hand and whispered, I am his mother. I revoke every tongue that speaks over him. I cancel every covenant not sealed by light. I close the gate. The jar trembled in her hand. A low growl filled the room. David stirred. Then, silence. Suddenly, the lights in the compound blew out. Not just in the prayer room. The entire compound. Outside, dogs began to bark. A cold wind blew in through the locked windows. And from somewhere deep in the dark, a woman began to sing. The first note was faint, like wind through hollow bamboo. A woman's voice, soft, steady, syrupy, rising and falling in a strange lullaby. Ijeoma froze. Chuka reached for his phone. No service. Not even emergency bars. Mama Nena stood still, eyes closed, her fingers trembling slightly. Don't respond, she whispered. No matter what you hear. Do not speak. Not even to call your son. The singing grew louder. David, who had been sleeping peacefully, began to hum along in his sleep. Ijeoma's eyes widened. His lips moved. His tongue twisted into words she didn't understand, ancient words, and the same melody flowed from his throat. Mama, he's singing with her. Don't interrupt him, Mama Nena hissed. That song isn't being taught. It's being remembered. Outside, the wind picked up. Candles flickered violently. The clay jar began to rattle on the altar. A knock. 3 soft taps. Slow. Calculated. The door didn't shake. The frame didn't creak. But something about the knock made Ijeoma's skin crawl. Who is that? Chuka whispered. Mama Nena didn't answer. Then came the second knock, not from the door, but the window. David sat up slowly, eyes closed, and said in a flat voice, She's here. Ijeoma lunged forward to grab him. But Mama Nena blocked her. I said don't touch him. Why? Because right now, touching him is like grabbing lightning. You'll both burn. David stood up. His eyes still shut. He walked toward the door. The air in the room became heavy, like smoke without fire. Something was pressing down from the ceiling, pushing the breath out of their lungs. Mama, please. Ijeoma begged. I'm losing him. Suddenly, the singing stopped. Dead silence. David halted, standing inches from the door. Then he said something that made the blood drain from Ijeoma's face. I want to go home now. Chuka gasped. That's not his voice. It wasn't. It was deeper, richer, wiser, like someone older was wearing David's mouth. Then came a new sound. The door creaked open, by itself. Darkness outside. Nothing visible. But the smell that poured in, river mud, wet leaves, and death. Mama Nena stepped forward. She pulled a piece of cloth from her wrapper, deep indigo, laced with white chalk symbols, and wrapped it around David's head like a blindfold. He stopped moving. She reached for the clay jar, lifted it above her head, and shouted, I bind the name that was spoken over this child. I silence the covenant sealed in ignorance. Let the child return to the mother, and the spirit return to the deep. The jar exploded in her hands. White smoke burst into the air. David collapsed. Outside, a scream ripped through the night, high, furious, and unearthly. The door slammed shut. Silence. The power came back. Lights flickered. Candles burned steady. Air returned to the room like breath after a deep underwater dive. David lay unconscious, but breathing steadily. Mama Nena wiped sweat from her forehead. Chuka just stood there, stunned. Ijeoma ran to her son, scooped him up, and wept into his chest. He was warm. His fingers curled around hers. He was back. But Mama Nena wasn't smiling. She sat quietly on a stool, staring at the remains of the clay jar. What now? Ijeoma asked, still holding David close. She's wounded, the old woman replied softly. But not gone. What does that mean? It means we only cut the tether. We didn't break the chain. The next morning, Chuka did what Chuka did best. He went into research mode. He compiled photos of the church, voice notes, videos of David's drawings, historical references on river altars. He even called a friend who worked at a local university to ask about pre-colonial aquatic worship patterns in the region. But what he found shocked him. There were multiple churches in multiple states, all with different names, but the same signature style. Miracle healings for terminally ill children. White-garbed female prophets named Miriam, Mariah, or Mommy. Sudden disappearances within 90 days. And each church was always located less than 1 kilometer from a natural body of water. It's a network, he said again. But not digital. Not financial. Spiritual. Ijeoma made a decision. She wasn't going to run. She wasn't going to hide. She would find every parent who had lost their child to these churches. She would document every healing that turned into a haunting. She would make every secret public. No more silence. This wasn't just about David. It was about all the others whose names were never written down. 3 weeks later, she uploaded the first video to YouTube. A simple title. The Church That Took My Son, What Really Happens After the Healing. Within 24 hours, 89,000 views. By the weekend, 2.1 million. And that was when the threat started. The first threat came as a comment on her YouTube video. You're playing with rivers you don't understand. No profile photo. Account created the same day. Comment deleted 10 minutes later, but not before Ijeoma screenshotted it. She dismissed it at first. But by the third day, a second message arrived, this time handwritten, slipped under Mama Nena's gate. The mirror was only one of 7. If you continue, you will know the names of the others, the hard way. Chuka paced the compound. This is serious, Ijeoma. These people are connected. I know, she replied, not looking up from her laptop. But I can't stop. I can't be silent. He sighed. Then we need to go bigger. We need to gather stories. Not just yours. That night, they launched an anonymous Google form for parents to share their experiences. They didn't expect much. But by morning, there were 126 submissions. Some short, some long, some drenched in regret, others in fury. But all had one thing in common. A miracle that turned into a disappearance. But something else happened. David changed. He was talking more now, full sentences, curious questions, even laughter. But sometimes he'd stop mid-sentence and stare into space, as though listening to a sound no one else could hear. One afternoon, while playing with his toy cars under the mango tree in the backyard, he asked, Mummy, do spirits get sad? Ijeoma paused. Why do you ask? Because I think she's crying now. Who? The lady in the river. Ijeoma's spine stiffened. David continued, softly. She said I'm the only one who ever left. And she doesn't like being alone. Later that evening, Mama Nena sprinkled holy water around the mango tree. She knelt, touched the roots and whispered, This tree is listening. Too much. Ijeoma frowned. What do you mean? The older woman brushed dust off her hands. Mango trees remember things. Especially those planted by women in sorrow. She then pointed to a carved symbol on the trunk. One Ijeoma had never noticed. A simple spiral. This tree wasn't here by chance. That night, Ijeoma had a dream. She stood at the riverbank again. But this time, David wasn't beside her. She was alone. The sky above her was crimson, and the water boiled like stew. From the depths, hands reached up, not to pull, but to offer. In their palms were mirrors, each cracked differently. And then, a voice, soft and weeping, said, He is not the only one. You are not the only mother. Ijeoma woke up sweating. Her phone buzzed. It was an email from a woman in Benin. My son disappeared after a healing in a river church. I never spoke about it. Until I saw your video. Please, call me. Attached was a picture. Her son's name, Temu. His drawing, a round object with 7 lines branching out, like roots or snakes. Chuka analyzed the drawing. That looks like a ritual map. 7 access points. Mama Nena nodded gravely. 7 mirrors. 7 gates. If they break even one more, the river will demand a flood. Ijeoma whispered, "What kind of flood?" "Not water. Souls." From that point forward, Ijeoma's home became a hub for testimonies. She conducted interviews, hosted live sessions, published a 3-part docuseries called After the Miracle, What They Don't Tell You About Prophetic Churches. Each episode went viral. Thousands watched. Hundreds shared. But someone else was watching too. One morning, David came inside, holding a folded piece of white paper. "I found this under the mango tree," he said. Ijeoma unfolded it. There was no writing. Just a drawing. 7 circles. 1 correct. 6 glowing red. At the bottom, a single line in tiny text. "We only need 6 more." Ijeoma stared at the drawing. 7 circles. 1 already cracked. 6 still glowing. "We only need 6 more." The message chilled her blood. This wasn't just a warning. It was a promise. She turned to Chuka. "We have to shut them down." Chuka rubbed his face. "How do you shut down a church that doesn't officially exist?" That was the problem. Most of these ministries weren't registered. They changed names frequently. Some met only once a month, in forests, beaches, or abandoned compounds, then vanished. But there was one name that kept reappearing. Mommy Miriam. Ijeoma began to ask deeper questions in her interviews. And in episode 4 of her series, she featured a woman named Ngozi, who had once served as an usher in one of Prophetess Miriam's gatherings. Ngozi was nervous. She wore a head wrap that covered half her face. Her voice trembled as she spoke. "I left after the 5th child disappeared. The girl's name was Kalechi. Her mother cried at the altar until she fainted. They told us to say it was rapture. That the girl had been taken by the Lord." Ngozi's eyes filled with tears. "But I saw it. They took her behind the altar curtain, and she never came back. The prophetess said, 'The water has accepted her.' That's when I ran." Ijeoma ended the episode with a question. "Who is Mommy Miriam really?" And that night, the answer came. She was up late, editing. Chuka had gone to bed. David was asleep on the couch. Then tap, 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 at the window. Not the door. The window. She turned. A woman stood outside, backlit by the moon. Head wrapped in white cloth. Eyes bright, almost glowing. But her most disturbing feature? She had no reflection. The glass caught everything, trees, shadows, even Ijeoma's own movement, but not the woman. Just emptiness where the figure should be. Ijeoma didn't move. The woman smiled faintly, then raised one finger and pressed it against the glass. A crack formed, not in the window but in the reflection itself, like a fracture in reality. Then she mouthed, 6 more, and vanished. The next day, Mama Nena came early. She walked the perimeter of the house, sprinkled camphor oil, and muttered incantations from a book wrapped in goat skin. Then she handed Ijeoma a bundle of dried herbs. "Burn this every night. Don't let the smoke go out until morning." Ijeoma asked, "Who was that woman?" Mama Nena paused. "They call her Mommy Miriam. But that's not her real name. That's the name of the body, not the thing inside it." Chuka looked up from his laptop. "I think I found something," he said. He showed them a blurred photo from a 1996 article in an old religious magazine. It featured a Mommy Miriam, same head wrap, same smile, standing beside a boy in a wheelchair. The caption read, "Prophetess heals boy with polio during beachside revival." But the article had a darker twist. That same boy had gone missing 6 days later. His mother had been arrested on suspicion of murder. Her only words to the police? She said the river needed him. They dug deeper. That same face, the prophetess, had appeared in 2001, 2009, and again in 2015, always with different names, different ministries, but always the same miracles. And the same missing children. How could one woman look exactly the same after nearly 3 decades? She wasn't a woman at all. David had another episode that night. He drew a spiral with 6 eyes. Each eye was crying red tears. He looked up at his mother and said, "She's trying to open the second mirror." "Where is it?" Ijeoma asked. David pointed at the TV. Chuka grabbed the remote and rewound the footage of Ngozi's testimony. There, behind the curtain of the altar, was a shimmer. Not visible at first, but when slowed down you could see it. A circular object pulsing faintly, like a pool of water floating midair. A mirror. Just like the one Ijeoma had broken in the prophetess's office. "We have to go back," she said. Chuka blinked. "To the church?" "Yes. Before they break the next one." Mama Nena nodded. "If you're going, you won't go alone." She opened a box wrapped in banana leaves and pulled out 3 things. A jar of camphor-infused salt. A string of coral beads, worn by midwives during childbirth. A strip of white cloth embroidered with Nsibidi protection symbols. These were not made by Christians. Not by Muslims. Not even by herbalists. These are ancestral tools, passed down by those who watched the waters before the missionaries arrived. Ijeoma took a deep breath. They had no weapons. No government support. No guarantee of survival. Just 3 people, a sick child, and 6 more mirrors that threatened to crack open the belly of Nigeria's spiritual underworld. She held David close. "We end it now." It was Friday night, the air thick with moisture and the scent of diesel. Ijeoma stood outside the iron gate of a dilapidated compound on the edge of ABA. The location matched what Ngozi described in her interview, an unmarked building near a refuse dump, behind a broken signboard that once read, "Living Water Revival Tabernacle." The gate was padlocked, but the wall was low enough to climb. Chuka helped Ijeoma up. Mama Nena followed, muttering something under her breath. They dropped into the silent compound. Inside, the church looked abandoned. Dust-covered pews. Cobwebs hanging from faded ceiling fans. But the altar was immaculate, swept clean, lit by 7 unmelting white candles. It was as though the rest of the building had aged, but the altar had not moved in time. Behind the curtain, same as before, they saw it. A mirror, round and floating inches above the ground. No stand. No wall. Just hovering. Its surface shimmered like oil in water. Ijeoma stepped closer. Her reflection was there, but it didn't move in sync. She raised her hand. The reflection delayed. She turned her head. The reflection smiled before she did. "It's not a mirror," Mama Nena whispered. "It's a watcher. It remembers what you've done and what you're afraid to do." Suddenly, the air shifted. The candles flickered. David, waiting outside with Chuka, screamed. They ran out to find him pointing at the compound's well. "I heard her voice again," he gasped. She said, "You cannot break what you did not create." Ijeoma's heart pounded. "Mama, what do we do?" The old woman pulled out the salt jar, drew a thick circle around the mirror, and chanted, "I invoke the names before names. I summon the silence before sound. Mirror, crack not for vengeance, but for truth." She poured the salt on the mirror's edge. The surface began to bubble, then boil, then scream. Not a sound wave, but a feeling, like a blade across bone. Suddenly, the mirror shattered inward, sucking its fragments into itself like a collapsing star. A gust of cold wind blew through the church. Then, silence. Only the dripping of water from the ceiling. "Second mirror," Mama Nena muttered. "Broken." But that's when Ijeoma saw it. Etched into the back wall, now visible after the mirror vanished, were names. 7 of them. But 2 had been crossed out. Kizr. David. The next 5? Murat. Pasan. Etam. Sophia. Hiniola. Chuka's eyes widened. "These are the next children." Ijeoma whispered, "It's a hit list." They took photos. Left immediately. Didn't look back. Back at the house, Chuka ran a search for every child with those 5 names who had appeared in recent viral healing videos. And what he found was terrifying. Each name matched a real child, in a different part of Nigeria, all featured in online clips from new ministries, led by different women, all wearing white, all with names like Evangelist Miriam, Prophetess Mira, Mummy Mirabel, Mama Mariah, Sister Mimi. "It's her," Ijeoma whispered. She's splitting herself. Cloning her presence. Mama Nena nodded solemnly. The first was physical. The second, spiritual. The next ones? They'll target the astral. They're not using just names anymore. They're embedding echoes into the air. Echoes? Sounds that find children in their dreams. Call them. Teach them songs they didn't learn. Invite them to rivers they've never visited. That night, David woke up in cold sweat. He pointed at the corner of the room. She was there. Who? The one with too many names. She didn't speak, but she showed me a dance. A dance? David got up, walked barefoot to the center of the room, and began moving in slow, ritualistic patterns. He didn't blink. His arms circled. His feet tapped. He spun and dipped. It was beautiful. And horrifying. Mama Nena gasped. That's not a dance. That's a summoning. She grabbed a cup of water and poured it on David's head. He collapsed. When he woke up, he had no memory of the dance. The next morning, Ijeoma got a call. A known number. She hesitated. Then picked up. Silence at first. Then a voice. For days. Then the third mirror opens. This time, it will not be a child. It will be you. Line went dead. The phone slipped from Ijeoma's hand. Her breath caught in her chest. For days. The third mirror. And this time, it will be you. No name. No number. No time to think. Mama Nena grabbed a red chalk from her satchel and immediately drew protective Nsibidi symbols around the windows and door frames. This is no longer about David, she said flatly. She wants you now. Because you broke her rhythm. For the next 2 days, they slept in shifts. Chuka fortified the compound with iron nails, spiritual seals, and crushed alligator pepper dust. But David, he became increasingly distant. He wouldn't eat, wouldn't speak. Instead, he sat near the mango tree, drawing strange symbols that looked like musical notations crossed with ancient maps. And one phrase appeared again and again in his sketches. The naming is the gate. By the third day, they received another package. No return address. Inside was a photo of Ijeoma, but not a recent one. This was a childhood photo. Age 7. Wearing her primary school uniform. On the back, scribbled in ink. I have always known your name, but you have forgotten mine. Mama Nena froze when she read it. It's beginning. The naming ritual. Ijeoma blinked. What does that mean? It means she's trying to rewrite your origin. If she succeeds, you will remember her as the one who gave you life, and the river will claim you as its child. They didn't understand. Until midnight. David woke up screaming. He pointed at the wall. There, written in water droplets that didn't evaporate. You were never Ijeoma. You were mine before you were hers. Mama Nena held her hands to her face. She's infecting your timeline. If you doubt your name, even for a moment, she will enter you. They had no choice. They needed a counter-ritual. An anchor. So Mama Nena took them to an old woman in the outskirts of Arachuco. A woman called simply, Madame Eek, the one who remembers. Madame Eek was blind. Yet she seemed to see them better than anyone. She touched Ijeoma's face, smiled and said, You've walked too close to the water. Now the river wants to name you. Ijeoma asked, How do I stop it? By remembering who named you, and saying it out loud, in the presence of your son. They returned home that night with strict instructions. 3 steps to anchor her true identity. Bring something from her naming day, anything connected to her birth name. Bathe in water boiled with bitter leaf and truth root, while reciting her full name backwards. Have her mother, if living, repeat the name 3 times before sunrise. But that was the problem. Ijeoma's mother was dead. As the hours ticked down to the 4th day, Ijeoma did what she had never dared before. She opened the old metal trunk in the back of her closet. Inside were her mother's belongings. Letters. Certificates. A sealed envelope marked, For my daughter's darkest night. She opened it. Inside was a single cassette tape, labeled, Your naming, 1993. Chuka found an old cassette player in a thrift shop. They pressed play. The sound was grainy, but then, a voice. Her name is Igioma, named for the peace we never had, and the journey we now begin. May her name guard her when I cannot. Mama Nena wept quietly. That is the true name. That is the voice she cannot overwrite. At 3:33 a.m., they began the ritual. Igioma bathed in the boiling herbs. Then, naked and shivering, stood in the center of the salt circle. David, holding the tape recorder, played the audio 3 times. With each repetition, the mango tree outside shook, even though there was no wind. On the third play, the lights flickered, the air grew dense, and then they heard her. Why fight me? I named you long before your mother did. Igioma stood firm. You are not my mother. You are not my beginning. And you will not be my ending. The room cracked, not in sound but in feeling, like a dream tearing apart. Then, silence. Not peace, but pause. As if something had been delayed, not defeated. David exhaled. I don't hear her anymore. Mama Nena nodded. You bought time. But the third mirror still stands. Just then, Igioma's phone buzzed. A text. No name. Just coordinates. And one word. Iniola. The next child. The coordinates led them to Igiba Waterside, a quiet fishing village nestled between lagoons and winding creeks. Chuka drove, tension thick in the car. David slept in the back seat, holding a sketchpad filled with swirls and wave-like eyes. Igioma clutched the tape recorder like a talisman. Whoever Iniola is, she whispered, we find her before she sings. They arrived just after dawn. Children were fetching water. Women stirred pots of yam by fire. Men prepared canoes for the day's work. But one thing was wrong. Every single person they passed hummed the same tune. For notes. Lo, lo, taifo. Fin. And again. Even David began to hum it softly in his sleep. They found the local headmaster, who pointed them toward a small house near the edge of the lagoon. That's where Iniola stays. Came here last month. Quiet girl. But. He hesitated. But what? Igioma pressed. She sings songs none of us taught her. And things happen when she sings them. The house was empty when they arrived. But the front porch was covered in drawings, childlike, but disturbing. A river with teeth. A woman with 7 mouths. Children floating, not swimming. In the corner, the words. Iniola was never her name. But she answers when the river calls. They found her at the riverbank. A small girl with deep brown eyes and tight braids, sitting in the water, not floating, but not sinking either. Just suspended. She sang the 4-note tune softly. And the water responded, rippling in harmony. Mama Nena whispered. She's in the pre-summon trance. The river is testing her voice. What happens if she finishes the song? Igioma asked. A third mirror opens. But this one won't just take her. It will awaken others. Suddenly, Iniola turned. She looked directly at Igioma. And smiled. Not like a child. Like something ancient wearing a child's skin. You came too early, she said, voice layered. But I'll give you one question. Ask it well. Igioma's lips trembled. She didn't ask where the third mirror was. She didn't ask how to break it. She asked, What are you? Iniola stood. The lagoon water rose with her, forming a spiral behind her back. I am the silence in your songs. I am the memory of water. I am the grief your mothers buried. I am the unwashed name in your baptism. Then she collapsed. Just a girl again. No spiral. No voices. Just Iniola, coughing softly. They rushed to her side. She's burning up, Chuka said. But Mama Nena shook her head. No. She's not sick. She's splitting. The entity inside is pushing to fully inhabit her. Iniola opened her eyes and whispered. I saw the third mirror. It's not a glass. It's a mouth. What? A mouth in a woman's chest. She sings and the mirror opens like lips. They brought Iniola back to their safe house. David wouldn't speak to her at first. But later that night he handed her one of his drawings. It was her, Iniola, but older, holding a staff made of water and light. I saw you in my dream, he said quietly. You were fighting something that had my face, but it wasn't me. Eniola nodded. I've seen it too. That night, as the two children slept, Igioma stood by the window. She saw something in the distance. A woman in white. But this one had no face. Just a mirror where her face should be, reflecting Igioma's own eyes back at her. Mama Nena joined her. It's time to stop reacting. What do you mean? We've been following her, chasing her fragments. But if the third mirror is a mouth, and the mouth needs a song, we must sing first. Sing what? A counter hymn. The first song, the one that was used before names, before mirrors. There was silence. Then Chuka stepped forward from the back room, holding an old book, leather-bound and half-burned. I think I found it, he said. He opened the page. The title read, Aquambu, the song before the spirits learned to listen. Its cover was torn, but the ink inside still pulsed with a strange heat, as if it had never fully dried. Chuka held it out with both hands. I got it from a retired archivist in Nsukka. Said it was once part of a missionary's forbidden collection. Lost during the Civil War. Some say it's the only surviving record of the first song. The page was written in Nsibidi glyphs with translated phrases beneath. Mama Nena ran her fingers across the lines slowly, her voice dropping to a reverent hush. This isn't just a song. It's a seed. A root sound from before sound was named. It can't be sung casually, it must be invited. Igioma leaned in. What happens if we get it wrong? Then the song won't echo. And silence will swallow us instead. That night, they prepared the ritual space. 7 stones placed in a circle. Salt mixed with blood of a goat and leaves from a tree that had never been touched by human hands. They brought in Eniola and David, placing them in the center. Eniola was feverish again, her eyes flickering open and shut like a radio scanning frequencies. Chuka played the audio from the cassette of Igioma's naming again, just to stabilize the energy. Then Mama Nena began the song. At first, it didn't sound like singing. It was breath and rhythm. The room grew colder. Candles bent inward. David began to hum. So did Eniola. So did the walls. And then, the crack. No, not on the floor. In reality, a sliver of darkness appeared in midair, shimmering like cracked ice. And from within that crack, came her voice. You sing my beginning? Then you must see my birth. Suddenly the walls of the room fell away. They weren't in the house anymore. They stood in a dark forest. But not the kind on any map. The trees were bones. The moon was wet. And in the center of it all was a woman in white. Her chest opened like a mouth. And from it came the third mirror. It hovered, slowly spinning. But this one didn't show reflections. It showed possibilities. Igioma saw one image of herself, rich, famous, holding a microphone, with thousands screaming her name. Then another, insane, locked in a room, singing to herself while her child watched silently. Then another third, floating face down in a muddy river, eyes wide open. These are not predictions, the woman said. These are offers. Choose your mirror, Igioma. But understand, each comes with a price. Igioma stepped forward. David reached out. Mummy, don't. Eniola said nothing. She was watching the woman too closely. Then she whispered something chilling. She's not the origin. She's the one who stole the song, not the one who made it. The ground began to rumble. The third mirror cracked. The woman screamed, not in pain, in rage. You will not steal back what I took. Mama Nena screamed to Igioma. Finish the first song. Igioma hesitated. She didn't know the words. But David stepped forward and began to sing. Eniola joined in. The woman's body began to dissolve, peeling like paper in fire. Her mouth mirror collapsed into shards. The forest faded. And then, they were back in the house. But everything smelled of smoke and ocean. David was breathing hard, but alive. Eniola was sitting upright. The mirror? Gone. No glass. Just a pool of water in the center of the salt circle. Igioma stepped forward and looked in. Not at her reflection, but at a memory playing in the surface. Her mother, singing. Igioma. My peace. My prayer. My daughter. She closed her eyes and whispered, I remember now. I was always mine. Never hers. Chuka stared at the pool. What now? Mama Nena knelt and kissed the floor. Now we wait for the echo. If she was only the thief, then the one who truly wrote the first song is still out there. 3 days passed. David was eating again. Eniola spoke in full sentences. The house stopped shaking at night. But something hung in the air. A tension without sound. As though a question had been asked. And the answer was still on its way. Then, on the 4th night, Ijeoma woke to the smell of rain. But the windows were shut, and the skies were clear. She followed the scent to David's room. He was fast asleep. But on his wall, written in wet fingerprints, were 4 words. I heard you sing. She called Mama Nena immediately. The old woman arrived before dawn, carrying a wooden bowl of kola nuts and crushed snail shells. This is not her, she said, gesturing to the writing. This is the original one, the one whose song was stolen, the one before the mirrors. Ijeoma's voice shook. So she's real. She never stopped being real. And now, she's listening. That day, the rain came without clouds. Just sudden water, falling from clear blue sky. Eniola sat outside, her face tilted upward and whispered. She's inviting us. Where? Eniola pointed to the mango tree. Where the roots touch blood. Where the river was first promised. The place where the first song was broken. Mama Nena paled. I know that place, she said. It's Odegwa's Grove. The grove wasn't on any map. But every elder in the region knew it. A forbidden place. Once sacred, now defiled. Legend said the first prophetess went mad there. After singing a song no human throat could hold. But if the first song was broken there, then maybe it could be repaired there too. They packed salt, charcoal, water blessed by 3 different churches, and David's sketchbook. Eniola carried only one thing. A small calabash filled with her own tears. She said to bring a gift that didn't belong to me, she explained. Sadness was never mine. It was given. The journey took 6 hours. Dense forest. No paths. Just whispers through the trees guiding them forward. At sunset they reached it. Odegwa's Grove. The trees were twisted. The ground was soft and warm, as if it had just exhaled. In the center, a stone altar, cracked, but still humming. Chuka set down the speaker. Played Ijeoma's birth tape. David and Eniola sat in the salt circle. Mama Nena scattered kola nut and spoke. Let the one who wrote the first word. Hear now the silence after it. Then they waited. Nothing. Not a breeze. Not a sound. Then a single hum. From deep within the earth. Low, ancient, sorrowful. And then she appeared. Not like the woman in white. This one was not human-shaped at all. She was water with memory, a face forming and fading in waves, eyes like wells that remembered too much. She spoke into their minds. You did not sing me. You remembered me. That is harder. That is holier. Ijeoma knelt. Why were the mirrors made? Because people feared forgetting. But what they placed in glass was not memory. It was control. And the river churches? The prophets? Echoes of thieves. Singing the melody without the mourning. Using my gifts, but burying my grief. David spoke. Can we fix the broken song? The spirit smiled through mist. Not with singing. With naming. She turned to Ijeoma. You, who reclaimed your name. Name the pain. Name the theft. Name what was never yours and return it. Ijeoma stood in the center. Took the sketchbook from David. Opened to the first drawing. The river with fangs. She spoke. I name this fear, borrowed. I return it. Next, a mirror cracked in 7 places. I name this control, stolen. I return it. Next, a drawing of her own face, half underwater. I name this silence, forced. I return it. Then she took the page with David's early scribbles. Before the healing, before the voices. I name this child. I keep him. The spirit pulsed with warmth. The mango tree bloomed in the grove. The altar healed. The soil hummed. The first song echoed again. Not as a performance, but as a presence. Eniola held out the calabash of tears. The spirit bent, accepted it, and said, "This sorrow was never yours. And now it belongs to no one." Then she vanished. Not in drama. In peace. That night, they slept in the grove. No dreams. Only stillness. The news never covered what happened in Odegwa's grove. No broadcast stations aired it. No church released a statement. No pastor claimed involvement. But everyone felt it. Across the country, river churches closed without warning. Some pastors fled. Others collapsed at the pulpit, unable to speak. And in more than 12 congregations, the mirrors shattered mid-sermon, with no one touching them. Ijeoma returned to her small home in Aba with David. It was quiet. No more footsteps outside. No more chanting in the night. Only the soft, silly sounds of a child finally being just a child. David stopped drawing faces with teeth. He drew playgrounds, mangoes, and stars. One morning, he came to Ijeoma's bed and whispered, "Mummy, the river woman says she's resting now. But she's watching through the rain." Ijeoma smiled, kissed his forehead, then let her watch. "We've got nothing to hide anymore." Mama Nena left the next week. She didn't say where she was going, only that the wind had another name she needed to remember. Before she left, she handed Ijeoma a carved stone shaped like a closed eye. "If you ever need to open truth again," she said, "hold this to your chest and call your name backwards." Ijeoma laughed. "Backwards?" "Yes. Because even the name you know hides something." Chuka stayed behind. He opened a small recording studio in the town. But instead of producing gospel hits or secular anthems, he started something else. A podcast. Voices the Churches Forgot. Each episode, a survivor spoke. Some from river churches. Some from other cults. Some from regular families who had simply forgotten how to love. The world listened. One day, someone asked Ijeoma, "Why didn't you sue the church?" She smiled. "I wasn't looking for revenge. I was looking for my son." And David? He grew stronger. No more nosebleeds. No more seizures. No more strangers calling his name from shadows. Just peace. And every once in a while, he'd wake up from a dream and draw a symbol that no one had ever seen before. Those symbols are now being studied in 3 universities. One professor says they're ancient Nsibiti. Another says they match markings found on stones by the Ogoja River. But Ijeoma just frames them and hangs them in the house. "My son doesn't need to explain his gift," she says. "He just needs to be free." On the anniversary of the final ritual, Ijeoma sat outside as the rain began to fall. It was soft, gentle, cleansing, and from the droplets came a faint hum. Not threatening, not demanding, just present. She whispered into the air, "I hear you." Then turned to David, who was waiting at the doorway with an umbrella and a smile. "Let's go inside, Mummy." And just like that, she rose. Not broken. Not afraid. Not searching. Just